Hi everyone, Patrick and Matt here for the Road to Freedom podcast, and we're continuing our discussion today on the non-aggression principle as it relates to education. As always, you can check out our podcast on a myriad of different outlets: iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, Google Play. Feel free to leave a review, comments. We have a Facebook page. We started a group for any group discussions on this or any other topics we've covered or should cover. So we'd love to see you at the Road to Freedom podcast Facebook page, and we're also on Twitter. So here's our part 2 discussion of the non-aggression principle as it relates to education. Well, let's talk about how this applies to the non-aggression principle. So yep, all these are scary. What the non-aggression principle tells us is not to use force or the threat of force against people or property. Well, immediately with public education, we're having good people coming in, stealing money from other people and saying, we need to do this to educate the populace. They don't. The only say that they have in how it's spent is if you get on a school board, or you can have a school board listen to you. But there was a there's no means by which you can say that you have a direct impact upon a person. So if you fund education for your child through homeschool means, let's say, you see the direct benefit from that one person. But that's through a voluntary means. The child is getting direct one-on-one education. They're able to learn at their pace. Anyway, that's outside the non-aggression principle. But then you are forcing children and parents to be in a school district that might be failing. You're forcing integration on people because the Supreme Court says that that having segregated schools is bad. And I'm not just talking racial here. We're talking about, I mean, you have busing programs where people are bused from outside areas because they don't have the right racial makeup. But, I mean, it can also be said for boys and girls. How come there are solely only boys and girls private schools? Well, it seems to me that the sexes learn differently. Again, not all, but if they learn differently and succeed in those areas, why are we still putting people together, grouped by, a diversity of people? Wouldn't it make sense? Me and Johnny learn math at the same rate, so we should go in this class here that teaches at an accelerated rate. Where, Susie and Billy, they learn at a slower rate, but they're really good in English, so they should go at an accelerated rate in this class. But no, there's no teaching to the student. It's teaching to the class. So you're being forced into a collective right off the bat.
Yeah, and one thing, our area is nice because we actually are one of the places that has school of choice. So, if you live outside of one school's district, you can choose to go to the other one. I'm not sure how the bus system works with that. Your parents might have to take you. But there's a lot of places around the United States that you don't have that choice. You live in that district, you have to go to that school, and if you don't want to, your parents have to buy a new house.
Right. Yeah, there's a news story where people get arrested for having an apartment in the school district that they want to send their kids to, but they don't live there long enough, and so it becomes fraud because you're stealing from the taxpayers by sending your kid to a non-failing school system. So we're going to throw you in a cage and subject you to government slavery because you tried to cheat the system. Well, it's people who are trying to get out of a bad system, and you're not letting them. I mean, if that's not co-opting slavery.
Yeah, if you think about it too, so it's people that have a house in one district, but they're renting an apartment in another district. So they're paying taxes in both districts. So how can you get off saying that they're stealing from somebody? If anything, not only are they giving tax-paying money to being forced to pay tax money to the district they want to get out of, they're also paying taxes in the district that they want their kid to go into.
Yeah. Well, this is why vouchers...
It shouldn't matter on how long they live.
Yeah, I mean, this is why vouchers always have a negative thought from the administration, because when you're taking, was it 10,500 per student on national average, and you're saying, okay, you can go to a different school system, or you can take that money and it follows the student. Well, then they're not able to utilize that within their district. So if we have this grand idea, like, okay, you have 10 people on your block. One person has a child, and they deserve free education, which isn't free, by the way. So you take the money from 9 out of those 10 people. You do take the 10th person, but they're paying a direct access fee as well. And you're saying you're doing it for the sake of that child that lives in your area. Well, as long as they go into a school system that we approve of. But if they go outside that school system, then the money can't follow them, because then we're losing money. And the you always hear like, oh, these are failing schools. These are failing schools. We need more government money. We need more raising taxes. We need to incentivize teachers to come in. If they're failing, to quote the best Rocky movie, if he dies, he dies. Let him die. Let him fail. The very fact that we have this top-down mentality where we think that education flows from a federal level down to the states. People who always chide Republicans and conservative people for trickle-down economics. This is trickle-down education. You have a system set up by the founders to have, right now 50 independent experimentation centers, and that's just on a state level. Let's break it down even more to a county level. You have 60,000 different laboratories where you can conduct experimentation. Where maybe Common Core is the best way to teach math. Let's do it in some of these areas. Let's take a more traditional route in some, and let's come together and say, here's the best education system. But no, it's not done like that. Common Core is directed by the feds. It comes down, or No Child Left Behind. It trickles down into the states. The states force the other districts to pay, or to play, and they get money, or if they don't incorporate it, then they lose out on it, and the people in power don't get reelected or reappointed because they don't get it.
Yeah, it's crazy that they wouldn't almost do it scientifically, where like you said, you have all these quote unquote laboratories, these schools that you could try it out in, but no, one person or a group of people up in the federal level was like, you know what, Common Core math is going to be the best thing.
Yeah.
Where I've got my cousins were telling me the other day when I was talking to them that they can't even help their kids with math anymore because they're all getting taught this way, and as they put it, you're taking 10 extra steps to find the same answer. That's just how they put it. I haven't really tried Common Core because I don't need to, and it looks stupid.
Well, maybe there's some benefit, but maybe there's a benefit for 3 kids out of 6 million people. Well, would that be good for the 3 million kids? Well, sure, absolutely. But there's no way to do testing. If we're supposedly this civilized nation where we're serious about science, and we chide anyone who questions the scientific standing theory, which is crazy to me. Why aren't we doing testing? Oh, because you shouldn't test with children's future. Well, okay, if you can tell me that the way that you're educating people today is the best possible way that we could do it, then okay. There would be, if you educated people today and they were able to do high level math, they knew the areas of science that would progress the species. If you had people writing tomes on the English language and able to critique literature from Shakespeare, if you had people who were able to create Frankenstein monsters because of their vast understanding of biology, then okay, like I would have a harder time, making my point that a utilitarian point and saying, well, yeah, it's still theft, but man, look at the kids coming out of the public education system. But that's not the case. So we're just okay to say, well, let's try nothing, and we'll see if that continues on. Society has progressed. It's not progressed. It's changed. Society has changed. Technology has come in, and you see a response to that in the marketplace. So in a private way, here's all the alternatives that I could find. You have private education. You have alternative ed, which is like, for those people who don't get classroom settings, maybe it's a different quadrant of learning. There's 4 main quadrants of learning, and we only teach in predominantly traditional public education, one of the 4 quadrants. But maybe you're better with your hands, so you learn to take apart an engine really well and put it back together, or drafting is your thing, or whatever it might be. That's what alternative education is. There's homeschooling, there's unschooling. You can have a co-op, Khan Academy, which is 100% privately funded by rich people to give free education to people. You have boarding schools, you have charter schools, you have magnet schools, military schools, online education, Montessori education. All these things are coming about because the public education system, there needs to be a different means. So like the U.S. postal system, why is there FedEx and all the different carriers that have arisen? Well, it's to try and overtake a market that is failing or isn't doing the best job in society. And of course, exactly like the U.S. postal system, only USPS can carry first-class mail. They have a monopoly on mail. That might not mean too much anymore, because not everyone, when's the last time you got a letter from not a bill or an ad? But we're still making people give up their money for an education system where politicians talk about reform, aka putting more money into it. Or you have teachers unions who are wanting more money. Like here in Kalamazoo, they just applauded giving every teacher $40,000 per year, which I think is pretty low too. I mean, for what they have to go through, like I can understand why teachers want more money, but at the same time, the government has put a quantified market price on your labor, and here in Kalamazoo, it's barely $40,000. But at the same time, hey, think back to that teacher, to all those teachers that were instrumental to your foundation. I mean, how many can you think of, Matt, that you can say like, oh, this teacher had an impact, or I learned really well from this teacher? A handful,
Yeah, a few.
But think about that. Who in your life, a friend, a pastor, parents, your friends' parents, where they've had a big impact on shaping and inspiring you. Teachers tend to not always make that list when we say think about the top 5 most influential people in your life. Well, Miss Myers from 8th grade history. She was one for me, but at the same time, it's kind of the exception that proves the rule. It's like, oh wow, that was a really good teacher. Well, shouldn't that be a case for a majority of them by now? I mean, we're all requiring master's degrees. We're all requiring, these different continuing education creds. But my teacher for basic econ, which if I would have known today how much I should know about the basic economy, I would have requested a different teacher or something. He was the worst teacher. He would give out packets so that he wouldn't actually have to teach. You would try and teach yourself complex ideas. And once you've figured out that you could write the first couple answers as the real answers, but then you could write gibberish in the middle of the packet, and he would grade just the top and bottom. You were able to get out of your work, and that's how you passed basic econ in my high school. But yet, when there was enough people that complained about him just as a person, the principal would come in, do an evaluation, and that would be the one day he would teach. And this is a single example, but in New York, you have these things called rubber rooms where teachers who are failing, or they might have disciplinary issues, or they might have touched kids. They're paid, you know, millions of dollars to just sit in and be paid to sleep. There's a New York Post article from 2016 that talks about how an estimated 200 to 400 teachers get paid while awaiting disciplinary hearings. Their salaries total $15 million to $20 million per year. And that's just the hold that teachers unions have, because you can't fire them. You have to go through this hugely complex, multi-purpose stage. There's no way to just say this person isn't working out, they're fired. Once you hire that person, they're pretty much in.
Yeah, and like you were saying, how getting like a teacher who just doesn't teach anymore, a bad teacher down the road, should just be open people's eyes enough that this is a teacher who's gone through secondary education to at least get their bachelor's, maybe even a master's, and now they're teaching and they suck and don't know that much. That should show you how flawed our school system really is. Like, high school is something that's supposed to get you ready for the real world, because secondary school is an option. You're required, forcibly to go to high school, but you're not required to go to secondary education. And so high school needs to be the thing that gets you ready for the world, and high school does not get you ready for anything. It's just like, I mean, it doesn't, they need to have, check writings classes, and there's kids who don't even know what checks are nowadays. They need to have, more economic things, more just real world classes.
Yeah.
And making sure people can read is a big thing too.
Right. Well, yeah, and we stick them in these classes. We give them, Romeo and Juliet, and you say, there's the English language. Love it. I took a college writing class in high school. So I think it was either my junior or senior year, and we had to read a book and do a chapter book. We had to read a book and do questions based on the book from a 5th grade reading level. And I, me being the petulant little child that I was, stood up and, questioned the teacher and was like, why are we reading such a infantile book? It was so stupid. It was about this kid playing baseball, and, obviously that was super interesting to me. But she was like, well, not everyone can read at a higher grade level, but a 5th grade reading level one for college writing. I'm like, this is ridiculous. But then I think it was karma to hit me back, because then we had to read Wuthering Heights, which is one of the books that if I could burn any classical literature, I would just throw all copies of Wuthering Heights into the sun, including the electronic ones. But that class, yeah. I liked the teacher. The teacher was nice, but it was insane. I could advance, like, she gave enough of the assignments out that I finished it within a week and a half, just in class, for that stupid baseball book. It was insane.
Yeah.
Well, and here's
funny thing about
teachers. You're right. They have a bachelor's or a master's degree, but what is it in? It's in education. It's not in here's how to teach economics. Here's how to teach math. Here's how to teach history. Here's different ideas on how to teach these specific categories. It's, well, we need a teacher who teaches history, so we're going to hire you based on your public education degree, and you kind of have to teach yourself how to teach other people this specific category. But you go into college, and Dr. Pence from Western Michigan, that man worked for JPL. He had articles under his name. He knew every single graphing calculator and all its tricks, and he had all the little peripherals, including a thing that you connected to a TI 86 that measured the boiling temperature of water that would graph it. I mean, like, this guy, to say he was a genius, it hurts other geniuses. But I'm any math class that I could take with him, I did, because he knew the subject and he knew how to teach. But we don't do that with high school students.
Yeah. Funny thing about college writing, I took that my senior year too. And what we were taught like APA format or something like
Oh
that,
yeah.
or MLA. First college course I have that I have like major papers written formatting. We learned Chicago. Never learned that in high school at all, but that's what this teacher liked.
Yeah.
But
So we need an authoritative czar to come in to make everyone do the same type of format.
yeah, I heard it works well in Russia.
Yeah.
No, going off of the teachers where you get a person with a general education degree, but throughout I'm not sure, but do they even teach, people skills and better ways to teach kids in college to these people that would be teachers? That's what you think would be a major focus for kids that are like, I want to go to college and I want to be a teacher eventually. You think at some point they obviously should take public speaking courses, and also, hey, look, here's, how to interact with people, or here's
different types of people.
I don't know if there's a course out there. Yeah, and different types. Like there would be, instead of just, oh, well, you've taken a lot of history, English, and math classes. Now you've got your general education. Go be a teacher. It's like, well, you've learned basic math and all that kind of stuff, but you weren't specialized in an area, and you don't even know how to teach people. Like college kids, and that's the sad part, is college kids will like intern or whatever at schools and be kind of attached to a certain teacher, and they're only as good as their teacher sometimes, where they could get placed with a teacher that just doesn't match it's just a whole flawed system.
Right. Well, again, you're teaching to a group. You're not teaching to individuals. And there are people that break away from that, but a lesson plan, you're designing a lesson plan for 30 to 40 kids. You're not figuring out, okay, this person learns at this rate with this style. With homeschooling. Homeschooling has an overabundance of curriculum that you can choose from. And so you hop on message boards where moms and some dads, I always want to make sure to represent homeschool dads, that are saying like, oh, what's the best curriculum? And you have like 30 options that they give you, which is great. So if one thing doesn't work for a child, you get rid of it. You're out, $100 or whatever it was, or probably not even that much. There's probably sample stuff that you can do, and you find one that works for you, and you purchase the packet, and you do it there. Or Khan Academy again is a great one. There's so many online opportunities to learn through different means where it benefits the individual rather than the collective. And this going back to Dewey, it's this type to do away with the individual. We have to force everyone in the same age group to come together and learn at the same rate and with the same thing. And it's been failing to meet any standard, and seems to be decreasing in what kids are supposed to be getting out of it.
Yeah, it seems like Dewey, the only thing he did right was the Dewey Decimal System.
Oh, yeah. I mean, don't you know how to use the Dewey Decimal System by now?
Yeah, I do at least. And also, even if you don't know how to use it, when you go to the public library and you get the number, it's way easier to find.
Well,
so thank you for that, Dewey.
So grouping books together is good. Grouping kids together, not so good.
Yeah, grouping books is fine. Inanimate objects grouped together can be good. Yeah. Children, not so much.
Oh, man. We're going to have to split this episode up. Do we want to talk about college?
I mean, do I know enough about the college stuff?
I mean, here's an article I found. Class of 2017 graduates have $39,400 on average of debt, which is up from the previous year. Americans owe $1.48 trillion in student loan debt, spread among about 44 million borrowers, and that's about $620 billion more than the total U.S. credit card debt. So when we talk about college, obviously price is a factor, but with guaranteed government loans, you have colleges knowing what the government gives out, and so raises tuition based on what the college, or what the federal government, or what the government guarantees. So that's why we having this bubble, and it is a bubble because it's going to burst, and it's a bubble where you get into credit card debt, or you start a business and the business goes belly up. Well, you declare bankruptcy, and you say, hey, I need to be reset, and your credit takes a hit, and you have a hard time for about 7 years, and then you're reset to okay standing, or at least good standing. That's not the case with student debt. You can't file bankruptcy from student debt, so you can be kind of a perpetual student as long as you're continuing to take money after money after money until whatever system forces you to stop doing it. So that's why you can have, the feminist arts degree who takes $125,000 out in debt and has a doctorate in feminist art. Is that really the best use of that money? No.
Yeah, good luck paying those loans back with that job.
Yeah, well, I mean, even with doctors, and we can say, doctors probably require schooling. If you look at like the hard sciences, engineering, the medical field, the things that are not the social schools, you could probably say, yep, okay, a formalized education system is appropriate for you. But same thing with doctors. You have to go to school for double the time. Well, what if you just want to be a general person that is a home doctor? Well, unfortunately, the government has regulated doctors that require licensing, and so you can't be that doctor with a leather bag who goes around going from house to house making home calls in the middle of the farm to treat Billy for appendicitis, or to diagnose him for appendicitis so you can go to a hospital, or a mule kicks him in the chest and so you can help him out there. There's more than just what the school provides. It's also the federal government guaranteeing loans from people who, if you're 17, you're not even allowed to be trusted to drink yet. But here, take out $80,000 in debt that you are forced to pay back, with an education that you might not use, or that job that you are going for might be replaced by robots, or might go away. The people who were making horse-drawn carriages in the 1900s had to waste all that education to make the horseless carriage. So hopefully they were able to transition to the Ford plant, where they were making way better money that way.
Yeah, and the crazy thing about a lot of these colleges is, I remember when I was looking up stuff for Western here in town, the tuition slowly got more expensive the farther you went into school. I can't remember if it got cheaper once you hit masters, but freshman, sophomore, junior, and senior year of just a bachelor's degree, you started cheap as a freshman and you slowly got more expensive as you went on, which seems like, why wouldn't they just leave it? Are you really needing that much more schooling, or more? What are you needing more of that you have to pay more expensive? And if you were gonna make tuition flip like that, wouldn't you make it the other way around, where like freshmen pay like $1,000 more, and I'm not saying to incentivize it, but it would go cheaper the longer you've been there. That's how most things work.
Yeah.
But they raise it when in reality, like, think about it though. What are you doing more? Like, let's say you're taking your normal like 14 credit hours a semester. Why am I having to pay more as a senior than a freshman is, when we're taking? Yeah, maybe I'm taking more advanced classes, but is that teacher really that much higher paid than the other teacher?
Yeah. Or
like, why am I paying more than a freshman?
Yeah, or you're getting the teacher aide to come in who's can't speak English, but you're supposed to be learning how to titrate dangerous chemicals from someone you can't understand.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there you have the government involved too. They're public schools who your tax money is going towards to prop up, and some of them hold just an insane amount of land. Like here in Kalamazoo, Western Michigan holds more land than any other business out there. But it's Western, so it has the ability to utilize tax money and tuition to make claims on property.
Yeah, and Western. Don't even get me started on that.
Well, and
They,
and college, you if now the requirement is to have people who start jobs to have a bachelor's degree, well then the bachelor's degree that you had 20 years ago is devalued. It has shrunk in demand, and if the bachelor's degree becomes the high school diploma, there's really no benefit for you to stand out. If becoming a janitor requires a bachelor's degree in janitorial services, that devalues the education rate that people before have paid. So when people talk about a college education back in the day versus today, it was worth a lot more back then than it was now. And what were colleges back in the day? Well, it was for people to advance, especially in religious studies. It only later took on this kind of general education purpose, where now you're pretty much required to go. But not everyone should go to college. In fact, if the kids that I have decide that they don't want to do college but want to be welders, or wants to study under a different type of education system, I think that's where it's going. I think people are seeing the bubble coming. It's starting to probably rupture soon. And once colleges go down, what does that say? People not need education anymore? Well, no. It's just, with the advancement of technology, you're having different types of education system comes in. Like, I do computer and video editing. Well, that was done just through coming alongside a person, learning about it, and now there's like 6 different websites that I can go to and learn how to do it. But I don't have a degree under it, so jobs that are looking for degrees are losing out on people who are self-taught or learn through a trade. Not all the time, but if your job requires that, then without a degree, you're losing out on talent.
yeah, and just getting degrees in general, like that's what's the dumb thing is, the employers are buying into the bubble, and so many students are buying into this bubble of, oh, I need this bachelor's degree. When for like this is just me in my schooling is, I was going to Western, getting a criminal justice degree, just a basic criminal justice degree with a minor in sociology. So I meet with my counselor one day, and I figured out, because I went online, figured out, was trying to map out the rest of my years there, and I'm like, well, what about this 24? I needed 24 extra credits to match the 120 or 130 credits Western requires for you to graduate with a bachelor's degree. Well, by the time I finished all my classes in my major, the thing I'm going to learn, criminal justice, and then my minor, which they also forced me to have, was sociology. I finished all of those, and I finished my gen eds, which a lot of the gen eds are not needed, because high school should be your general education.
There you go.
I still had to take 24 credits on top of doing all of their requirements already to meet their requirement to graduate. So they were going to make me do another 2 semesters of school and pay them. I think they're around $6,000 a year right now, without room and board and all that. So they were going to charge me another $12,000 roughly to just take classes. And I asked the teacher, not the teacher, asked the counselor, I go, well, what kind of classes do I need to take? She goes, any. Any class. I just needed credits. That's all I needed. So these schools, they know they're able to get away with it because people are buying into the fact that you need an education now.
Yeah. Well, and then,
and that's just not the case.
If you're 3 years in and you have another year and then they add more classes on top of it, they know that you're kind of stuck. Well, is the past 3 years, was that a wash and I don't have anything to show for it, that slip of paper, or, do I go into more debt and take out more money and go to more classes and stay out of the workforce longer? It's that that gambler's paradox where, well, I'm already so far in the hole that I have to climb up from here by continuing to possibly dig down further.
Yeah, and see, I don't know. That just my one experience has kind of tainted college for me. Like I might finish my degree one day because I do have the GI Bill. Thank you, taxpayers.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, I pay into it too, so I'm paying for part of mine. But I have that, and even I am like, I was a junior, so I was at that 3 year mark. Had about a year and a half left.
But hey, if you become your own boss and start your own security company, you don't need it. If you become successful, you could be that person that says, I went to college and it was worthless for me.
Yeah, I can require people to not have bachelor's degree to work for
There
me.
you go.
Oh, you got a bachelor's degree? Sorry, I don't like your education.
Right.
You're unteachable now.
Yeah. Well, and
I'm just ready for that bubble to finally pop.
Yeah. Well, and it'll be interesting to see because look at all the things that have come out of college. The socialist, Marxist teachers. And there are some, but I think we are seeing a drastic social change in college makeup that we haven't seen since probably the 60s. You have Antifa and all the people that hate freedom of speech. You have all these anti-intellectual ideas that are coming out of the college. Maybe it's time for the system to burn down and for the market to hiccup and re-regulate within itself what the proper role of post-secondary education is in this country. The only problem is unless the laws change or Bernie Sanders bails out those people who wanted to take feminist stance theory for 8 years, bails them out, the people are still going to be left with paying that bubble. It's going to burst, but there with the housing crisis, bubble burst. And then the banks owned houses, so they actually had capital. Well, college bubble burst, and there's no, unless you're going to own the person, which we determined long ago that was illegal. There's no, there's nothing to incentivize a detente between those who hold the debt and those who don't.
Yeah, and it's crazy that is the one debt that isn't erased with bankruptcy.
Yeah, well,
it's like, you could have $1 million racked up in this stuff, but you're $20,000 from 2 semesters at a college. Sorry, that's never going away.
Yeah. All right. Anything else?
That's about all I have for education, I think.
So for our podcast, we talk about having an impact on a local level. So what can be done? Well, I think the biggest thing we can do is opt out of the current mold. I'm not going to discourage people from getting onto school boards and trying to defeat the system within, but I think if it's one of those things that people are going to have to just take a direct impact in their own child's education, remove them from the schools that are becoming homogenous, that are becoming more violent. If you have more homeschooling, the less likelihood of a school shooting occurring. That would just be domestic violence. But having a transition into a homeschooling co-op, alternative schools, understanding that the current model that's been set up for 150 years or however long it's been to get people jobs in factories or in that type of old school thinking isn't the model that is going to advance us. We need to stop teaching to the group and start teaching to the individual. And I'm sorry, that's going to require sacrifice on parents to take a direct impact into their child's education experience. And I think if we have a large swell, especially in the libertarian movement, like you see in at least for the Christian parents that I know, every year there's more and more that come across the stage where we do student dedication who don't have a high school but are homeschooled. And this understanding that homeschooling, while you can't be socialized in that. Well, there are enough co-ops happening around, especially in Kalamazoo here, where you can find people of all different shapes and sizes to come alongside your kid and socialize them, whatever that means. But why aren't we having a more direct say in how our children are learning, what they're learning? Like, think about history. How was history taught to you? Well, it was this president, then this president, then this president, or it was this war, and this war. Like, think of where American history is bifurcated for historic, looking at the history of the United States. It's always on the Civil War and Reconstruction. But let's say that McDonald's starts up a school and comes into your neighborhood, forces you at gunpoint to attend their school, and sits you down and tells you about the history as it relates to the presence of McDonald's over the history. I mean, you would call that indoctrination. But here it's just, well, that's how you learn history. But, I mean, think about all the things you didn't learn in school that you're learning online, through podcasts, through YouTube. Yeah. I mean, how many times a month do we talk about the men who built America? And this.
I love that documentary. I just watched it again. That's the thing. You hear about Rockefeller, Carnegie, J.P. Morgan, and all of them, and they're villainized.
Well, yeah, they're the robber barons.
Monopolies. Yeah, they
which there's a really good book called The Myth of the Robber Barons.
Yeah, and they didn't teach that much, but or they didn't treat their workers the best. But if it weren't for those mainly three people, America would be vastly different. Like, buildings were built with Carnegie steel. Rockefeller lit every home before electricity. And then
here's the thing about Rockefeller. Gas. Rockefeller saved the whales. He saved the whales. Everyone is using whale blubber. Yeah, and he caused people at 6 o'clock at night, when the sun went down and everyone was like, well, time to bed, I guess. He taught an entire generation to read because people were able to turn on his what he manufactured so that they could stay up longer and read. He caused literacy rates to skyrocket in the United States. It's amazing, but I've never heard that before, ever.
Well, yeah, and something I just learned, too, because after I watched The Men Who Built America, I saw a thing pop up for Carnegie. And by the way, everyone says Carnegie. It's Carnegie. Even his own great-grandson keeps on saying it.
Well, clearly
Carnegie.
He's wrong,
but
we've collectivized his name, and it's Carnegie.
But the thing that he did is, he did his steel mills, yes. He worked his workers a lot and everything like that. But not only did he help build America, but once he sold his company for like $480 million to J.P. Morgan, which is like hundreds of billions now, no one in the history has ever amassed a fortune as much as Andrew Carnegie. But he devoted his life after he sold his company to peace. Like, I watched it was about how he actually tried to broker peace in Europe before World War I started, and how there's hundreds and hundreds of libraries around, or maybe even thousands of libraries around the whole world that he has made and given money to, and it's just like, I think he, out of his whole time, he's given, they said he gave away to charities $320 million of his fortune. Well, so he gave away more than 3/4 of his fortune to all these charities and for peace and to better people.
Right, because
as a whole.
Because the worst thing for business owners who aren't in the military-industrial complex to have happen is for millions of people's lives to be destroyed, and for the normal everyday activities of the market to be interrupted by a giant war that is completely unnecessary, as World War I was.
Yeah, and it was interesting because Carnegie, he was considered like the first defense contractor because of his steel was used to build the U.S. Navy, but he didn't like how it ended up, with all the war and everything like that, and that's why he devoted his later years to peace and trying to stop it.
Yeah, So here's the deal. You wouldn't have learned any of that in school unless you had that really good teacher that cared about that stuff. But no, you learned about the New Deal and how amazing the New Deal was. And, oh, man, if they didn't do anything more with the New Deal, that would have been 10 times worse. Or how necessary it was for World War I to happen. But you don't there's so much unknown history that's out there. Or you have a rise of revisionist history that's coming out. Like, the Civil War was just about slavery. Really? Was it? Everyone in the South just supported slavery, even though slaves and slave ownership was super low at the time of the Civil War? Or was it about states' rights and the ability to nullify actions of the federal government? And was Abraham Lincoln this pinnacle of a paragon of virtue who only wanted to help the enslaved folks? Or was he a tyrant who threw journalists in jail, who suspended the right of habeas corpus, and who said, "I don't care what happens to the enslaved population, I just want to protect the Union"? I mean, those are things that you have to read about after the fact. Those aren't ideas that you're presented and you're not debating in class. You might have that in college, but college is the time where I honestly think that's where you're taught. You have to teach yourself how to learn, because you're presented with alternative theories and different ideas. Like criminal justice class that was really good was the criminal theory, the theories behind how crime happens. I had a progressive Marxist professor who was really good, and him and I would not argue, but we would discuss classical theory of crime versus the class conflict theory of crime. Those were super helpful for me in learning the different types of situations that result in crime. But you don't get that. You just get somehow the mafia just arose and took power and it was really violent, and they got into alcohol. Or is it because the government, had a monopoly on alcohol and prohibition, and it caused the rise of a black market to pop up and fulfill a need of people who wanted the freedom to engage in alcoholic drink? I mean, all these things are suppressed. They're not discussed. And if you, as a teacher, discuss them and not following the game plan, your job, you might not have that job. You might have to go to a private school if you can find one. But to all this to say, the non-aggression principle says not to do violence against people or their property. Public education does violence to the people who are paying for it. It's done violence at the point of a gun to people who are the children of it. It affects everybody in the process, and we need to realize that it's not the way to carry out education is not through the point of a gun. It's through experimentation. It's through teaching to the individual rather than to the group, and to stop politicizing how people grow and develop into individuals through their education. All right. Yeah. Well, anything else? We're at an hour and a half here, so I'm. If you're listening to this episode, it's been split into two because we definitely don't want you to have to listen to us rant and rave for 90 minutes.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this is the Road to Freedom podcast, and we're here to say live radically and live free.
And privatize it.
Amen.